Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. We're back for another preview podcast ahead of Sunderland's championship match against Bristol City at the Stadium of Light. So joining myself, Joe Nicholson, we are joined by Robin's writer and podcaster, Matthew Withers. Matthew, it looks like in recent weeks, looking at results anyway, it's been a bit easier to be a Bristol City supporter.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Yeah, it has been. We had a really good Easter with two big wins against high-flying Leicester City, and then I guess somewhat local derby against Plymouth Argyle. 2 1-0 wins, but two pretty decent performances more than anything. And I think most football fans, you kind of take the sort of defeats and things if you play well. But we hadn't been playing well before that. I think we'd lost 5 out of 6. Ironically, again, had a couple of really good wins away at Middlesbrough and then home to Southampton, who were on that amazing unbeaten record. And then we go and lose to Queen's Park Rangers and Sheffield Wednesday. And it's been the story of our season. We play well against the good sides, the sides that want to play sort of football. But those teams that have that low block seems to be the way of saying things these days. We really struggle to break down, yeah.
You mentioned some of the results there. So it's 3 wins in the last 4 for Bristol City. They've beaten Leicester, beaten Plymouth 1-0 in that run. Before that run of 3 wins in 4 games, it was 4 defeats in a row. So has Liam Manning, the manager, has he changed much in recent weeks, and has there been much different to go on this run?
Yeah, he switched to playing a 3 or a 5, if you like, and just some of the personnel sort of changed. He's brought in Hayden Roberts, although he did make changes at half-time against Plymouth on Saturday. I think generally when Liam Manning first came in, even though our football hadn't been brilliant, there was a real appreciation for Nigel Pearson and what he'd done in terms of reshaping the club. We had some massive wage earners that we had to get off the books. And so even though the football under Nigel Pearson and the results weren't always brilliant, he was still very popular with a large section of our fan base. So when he was kind of unceremoniously let go, and the club didn't handle that very well at all, Liam Manning came in and he was always onto a little bit of a hide into nothing for a large group of our fans. He absolutely wants to change to a possession-based sort of team, again, as is the modern way, it seems, with modern coaches. And the first sort of few games, taking the first one at QPR, which was his, he's only in the building a couple of days. But the next few games, you could see what he was trying to do, but you would still have fans saying, just get it forward, stop this sort of playing around at the back. And then he's gone on this sort of a bit of a dip. And I'll be honest with you, that there was a fair chunk of the fan base calling for him to go. Didn't think that he could cut it at this level. I've absolutely not been one of those. I think he needs time, and he needs at least another transfer window, if not 2, to try and get his own players in. But I think the international break came at a really good time for us, which is unusual for us. Normally we're playing well up to an international break, and then after an international break we sort of fall off a cliff. But it came at a really good time, and the first game back was the Leicester game, and it was a really open game. I don't know if you'd seen any highlights. Jamie Vardy missed a hatful. Our keeper was outstanding that day, but we also created plenty of opportunities. So it wasn't a smash and grab. I think we deserved the win. And then Plymouth, first 20 minutes, I'm not going to say we were dreadful. Plymouth were very good. They're at home, they're struggling. They came at us, but didn't really. I don't think the keeper really had a save to make. And then he changed it after 20 minutes. He went to a 4. We got more control, and really for the rest of the game, we were in pretty much total control. We only scored the 1 goal, but yeah, we played sort of really well for the rest of that game. So I think he's changed things around. He's starting to win a few more fans around. And if we can have a good remainder of the season, then you go into the summer with a little bit more optimism, don't you?
Yeah, you've spoken a bit there about the kind of style of play under Manning. Now, Sunderland have had 2 very different games in their last 2 fixtures. They went away to Cardiff on Good Friday, had a good 2-0 win there. They had a lot of the ball. Cardiff kind of sat off them and allowed Sunderland to play. But then they played Blackburn on Easter Monday, and Blackburn were more in their faces. They were pressing higher, kind of isolating Sunderland players on the ball and exploiting the space in behind. Now, how do you think Bristol City will set up coming to the Stadium of Light on Saturday?
I think you probably have looked to see what Blackburn did and try and replicate that. I mean, we do like to try and when we're at our best, and certainly when we played Southampton and Leicester as well to an extent, we were putting that press on. We've got some really energetic players. Jason Knight, a player we signed from Derby County last season or in the summer, he's just non-stop. His energy levels are unbelievable. And he's also brought in Scott Twine, who was on loan at Hull from Burnley. And then we took in from Hull in January from their loan. That was cancelled. Burnley let him come to us. Played the first game and scored, then got injured. And then he's now, so he came and played a little bit in the Leicester game and then a little bit more against Plymouth, and he's the kind of 10 that unlocks things for us. So I think we'll still look to try and play a press. I don't know whether he will go 3 or whether he will go 4 at the back. I think it depends kind of just how he views it, really. Yeah. But that's in much the same way as you're saying about Sunderland. It's the same as us. You don't know what you're going to get from us. We could put in a really, really good performance, or it could be a performance where, it's just, you look at it and you think this just isn't the same team.
Mm-hmm. So obviously now 6 games to go. We were just saying before we came on, there's not really in terms of like league position much to play for between these two clubs. I think they're 12th and 13th. But what will be kind of seen as a good season for Bristol City if they end with 6 games to go? Would a top half finish be seen as a success for them, or will they have wanted a playoff place at the start of the season?
I mean, I think certainly from a club point of view, the owner, the board of directors would have expected a top 10 finish and pushing for the playoffs.
Yeah.
In fact, our chairman, the owner's son, came out and said that we had certainly a top 10 budget, maybe even instead of top 6. As fans and I don't know about you, Joe, and if it's the same with Sunderland, I think modern day fans expect to win and to get promoted, and I've been following the club for nearly 50 years, and so I'm a bit more realistic. So at the start of the season, I said I'd expect a top 10 finish, and absolutely that. As we went into the last knock-ins, we'd be in with a shout of a playoff place. For me now, where we sit, I still want a top 10 finish. I think we need another. I think it might be another 3 points, maybe 6 points to better what we did last season. And I think that's what you want. You want to always see progression. It's been a bit of a tumultuous year with what happened with Nigel Pearson. And so Liam Manning coming in, trying to put a new style on. I think if we can get top 10, then I'm not going to say all fans will be happy, but fans of my age will kind of accept that and then look to progress next season when we absolutely would be looking to be vying for a playoff place with the right recruitment. But as you know, it's such a tough league, league.
And I think that's the challenging thing, isn't it? That over probably more than half the teams in the division at the start of the season will be targeting a playoff place or think they can get in the playoffs. And Sunderland certainly thought that at the start of this season because they did it last season. And they snuck up to 6th and managed to get in the playoffs. And at the start of the season, it looked like they had a similar squad that could challenge again. And they kind of shot themselves in the foot this season with the managerial appointment and how the season's unravels. But it's certainly kind of a very underwhelming kind of season compared to last season.
Where were you when Mowbray left? Because you were still, it wasn't like you were really struggling, was it, at the time?
They were 3 points off the playoffs. They were around 10th, but they were 3 points off the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, he's a manager, obviously, much like Pearson, old school experience, lots of promotions. So I was surprised at that. I kind of wasn't surprised at Bill because he was the hot property from what he'd done at QPR and did an okay job at Rangers. But obviously that fell sour pretty quickly, didn't it? So, and then is Dodds someone that's come from internal? Yeah.
Well, Dodge was actually in charge the last time that these two sides played at Ashton Gate in December. So we had 3 games in December.
Right.
After Mowbray left, Dodge was in caretaker charge for 3 games, and Bristol City was the 3rd game. So he's been part of the coaching staff, and now he's in charge until the end of the season. But I was just going to ask you, because it's always interesting to get a different perspective from like an outside looking in of what have you made of Sunderland this season, and how have you kind of viewed them?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, lots of changes. I think when you lose, and his name's completely gone out of my head, but the striker that went to Southampton.
Ross Stewart.
Yeah. Him. You've obviously had Jack Clark out injured, who, sadly for us, I think came back, didn't he, in the last game?
He came off the bench,
Yeah, is a player that frightens us whenever we've played you. You know, Sunderland's a massive club. I think a lot of Bristol City fans kept an eye on it because the Netflix series, but also with Lee Johnson going there, and Jamie McAllister. You know, and we've had a lot of players that go there. In fact, I've got a bit of a quiz for you at the end. But you keep an eye on it. Massive club, and absolutely you should be Premier League. Let's face it. And so definitely should be challenging for playoffs. And you know, when you see a club like Coventry City, who again, and no disrespect to Coventry, because they've got a tremendous history, but with everything they've been through, for them to still be challenging like they are, and a FA Cup semi-final, you look at and think, just how's that possible? You know, that should be Sunderland. You know, your fan base is second to none. So yeah, it's been, you can't hide behind it. It's been a poor season for you. You know, I think that thing around the managerial changes, it does have an impact, especially if you try and play a different style, or if the character that comes in isn't the right fit. So yeah, like us, I think if the season finished tomorrow and we both stayed where we were, I think we'd both view it as a poor season.
Yeah, and I think that's because Sunderland obviously finished 6th last season. Obviously, they'd just come up from League One. So if last season, for example, they'd finished 17th, then maybe this season could be viewed as progression. But the fact that they did sneak into 6th last season and then have gone back down makes it very difficult to kind of, for fans to see it as a success. But going back to the Bristol City game, as we mentioned before, the last time they played was in December. Bristol City winning that game 1-0 with a penalty. Just looking at the side that played that game, one player that did impress me was Taylor Gardner-Hickman, who I think has missed the last 2 with a calf injury.
That's right.
So what is the kind of latest team news, and how much would they miss him if he's out?
It's an interesting one with Taylor. Is a young lad that we signed initially on loan from West Brom, and then as part of an Andy Vyman going to West Brom in January, we then made that signing permanent. He's a good player. He's not really set the world alight. He's had good games, as you're sort of saying with that one, and then he's had other games where you kind of, you know, he did okay. So I don't expect him to be back fit, and he certainly wouldn't start. I expect it to be a midfield of either Matty James or Joe Williams with Jason Knight. Jason Knight had been playing in a kind of advanced midfield role, if you like, a 10, but he's not really a creative 10. He's just a runner, really. No, that's unfair. He's got more about him than that, but he's not a player that's going to unlock defences with a through ball. So I would expect it to be Matty James probably, and Jason Knight. He will play Scott Twine in the 10, and then he will probably have Anis Mehmeti wide. He might go with Mark Sykes, who's been on the bench last couple of games and has come on and made a real impact. And then sort of down the middle, it will be either Naki Wells or Tommy Conway. He likes to play a 1 sort of down the middle. The defence is fairly settled. It depends whether he does go 3 or 4, but it's likely to be, I would imagine, I mean, the keeper is nailed on. He's played every game. So Max O'Leary in goal. If he goes 4, it will probably be George Tanner on the right, Zach Viner and Rob Dickey in the middle, and Cam Pring on the left. And then, as I say, James Knight and probably Mehmeti, Conway, and Sykes. I don't know when I've said then, maybe Twine in there. But yeah, I mean, we've got a lad, Anis Mehmeti, who was signed from Wickham, who's a hell of a talent, but again, consistency hasn't been there. Over the last 6 weeks, he's actually played really well, so it will be interesting to see how he plays. And actually, prior to a recent run of form, probably his best game in a City shirt was away at your place last season. He played
the
really
1-1
well.
draw.
So, when we got a penalty after about 5.5 years or whatever it was.
I remember they hadn't a penalty for ages, had they? And then they got one and stayed with life.
Yeah, exactly. So the team is kind of settled. He does like to make changes, but I would imagine it will be that, and it depends again whether any of them have come through the Easter period with any knocks or anything, but it will be that sort of squad.
We've talked about how Bristol City might set up. We usually just finish our podcast just by asking our guests just for a quick score prediction. How do you think the game is going to go? Sunderland are very difficult to predict at the minute because, as we've seen, went away to Cardiff and won 2-0 and then get thumped by Blackburn 5-1. But what's your prediction for the game?
So I'm going to go 1-1 again. I think if we turn up and we play with an intensity, then we've got every chance of getting something out of the game, and that could be a win, especially on the back of your defeat last week. Now you'd expect a reaction from Sunderland because of that. So on that basis, I'll go for a 1-1.
Yeah, I was going to go for a 1-1 as well. I think Sunderland, they have to tighten things up after that 5-1 defeat. And just looking at Bristol City stats as well, it looks like they've got a decent defensive record compared to the teams around them.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we again signed Rob Dickey in the summer from Queen's Park Rangers, and he's been outstanding. Not the quickest, not slow, but not the quickest. But has formed a really good partnership with Zach Viner, a young lad who I mean, he's not so young now, but had come up through our academy, and they've done really, really well. And then on the right, we've got as I say, George Tanner, who was on Man United's books as a youngster. He's really good as a one-on-one defender. So yeah, defensively, we've been really sound. The goalkeepers, he needs competition, but he's nailed on number one for us. And so it's probably, it's without a shadow of a doubt, is what's kept us away from serious relegation problems, because we just haven't scored enough goals. That's where we've really struggled, is the other end of the pitch.
Well, just before we go, Matthew, you said you had a quiz. Is there
any? I do, yeah. So it's to do with former players. Okay. And I was looking, and there's probably about 20 odd players that have played for both clubs. And I just wondered how many you could name. Putting you on the spot, Joe. Sorry.
It's going to be a challenge. I think it'll be interesting for the listeners to try and think of some off the top of my head. Bailey Wright.
Yeah. He was very popular, wasn't he, at your place?
Yeah, he did well. He only left officially end of last season. He's gone to Singapore. But yeah, he was always a good figure. Trying to think.
I mean, some will definitely be before your time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
So a couple of recent ones. So Antoine Semenyo. Who didn't have the greatest loan spell at yours, but has now gone on to do really well. Gary Hours. I've got to know Gary through our former Players Association, and he's a local. He does a lot of the radio broadcasts, so I'm sure he will be at Sunderland doing the broadcast. So yeah, Gary Hours, Martin Scott, fullback, John Stead, Danny Simpson, Andy Cole, who was massive for us. I know it was towards the end of his career with you, and we also had sort of players on loan. Stone John, we had Adam Matthews played for us, Louis Nyatanga. You've got loads. I mean, there's Mick Hartford, Alan Hay, Mike Hooper, goalkeeper. Yeah, Stone John McFell, Tom Ritchie, who's one of our former players. Really great guy. Yeah, so quite a few there. Danny Simpson, John Stead. So yeah, I think there's about 20 odd players. You kind of forget some of them, don't you? So yeah.
No, that's a good question. I'm sure the listeners would have enjoyed that, and hopefully you got more than me at home. But Matthew, thanks a lot for joining me on the latest episode of the Raw podcast, and enjoy the game
the invite.
on Saturday.
Yeah, you too.
If you like what we do here at the Sunderland Echo, you can subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we will have all the build-up ahead of Saturday's match as Sunderland face Bristol City. You can head over to the SAFC section of the Sunderland Echo website for all the build-up, and we'll also have updates, analysis, and reaction from the Stadium of Light. So once again, thanks a lot for listening to the Raw podcast.